Okay, here's one from Matt S. in our Discord. Where do you expect this roster to rank defensively?
Defensively, I think is...
And I would say there are probably two parts to this question if we were to really extrapolate. The end of the year ranking, which will factor in Joel missing time,
yep.
some of the older players being in and out of the lineup, either by choice or as a result of injuries. And what does their ceiling look like? Like, are they a top 5 defense at their ceiling, but also where do they end up in the aggregate? Probably two different answers.
Well, and also even beyond that, like, I guess it's sort of tied to that second one. Like, when Joel Embiid ramps up to a playoff level Joel Embiid, like, can he bring them even higher?
I would say, if I were to start and say pre-All-Star, I would look at them as a top 10 team defensively, because the pedigree has been there even when you seemingly didn't have the same type of players with the wings that you now have in Paul George, Caleb Martin, and even what Kelly Oubre has turned into defensively, where you at least trust him and putting him on one of the better perimeter players. And of course, with Joel Embiid on the back clearing things up, I think that you're in a pretty good spot there. Andre Drummond, defensively, it just helps you when you rebound too, making sure that you get the defensive rebounds, help out in that way. Off the bench there, when you look at some of the other pieces that they have, they may not jump out at you, but when you're out there sharing the floor with some of the others and having the wing depth that you do overall with Joel Embiid, Andre Drummond behind you, I would say pre-All-Star, I would look at them as a team that I would hope that they're in the top 10 when we're discussing this same topic at that time, because they have the personnel where they're good enough to make sure that they should be a top 10 team defensively.
Assuming Joel Embiid plays 65 games, I would be very disappointed in the squad if they're not a top 10 defense. And to Kyle's point, when he's on the floor, like, they will probably be playing at a top 5 level, like right around there. Like, you know, it could be somewhere in the 4 through 6 range, but right within that realm. The question becomes, like, when you get to the playoffs, do they have enough on a team like Boston, which is what we're going to be measuring them against pretty much from now until next May, where they can't hunt a bozo? And you've seen a lot of pictures of Tyrese Maxey in the gym.
I was going to say, and that's his stated goal, right? Is to be able to freely switch and not have the team suffer.
And for the most part, and I guess Eric Gordon could be like half a bozo because he's just lost so many steps. He's not anywhere near what he used to be. But for the most part, Tyrese is kind of like the only bozo on the team. And by bozo, I just mean someone you can pick on, not an actual bozo, because Tyrese Maxey is obviously a great kid. It's just a term, and specifically one that comes up when talking about the Celtics.
He's the weakest link defensive.
Yes. Outside of that, I think they're pretty competent, 1 through 7 defensively. And that's not something we've said all that often. I think the trade-off of that is you have some streaky shooters, and I think that's probably more where my concern will come in. But defensively, if they are not at a top 10 level by the end of the season, and if they're not playing at a top 5 level or right around there with Joel Embiid on the floor, I'd be pretty disappointed.
I think top 8 is where I'd be shooting for if I were them. If you look at last season where it ended up, top 5 was Minnesota, who I expect to be there again. Boston, I expect to be there again. Orlando, I would expect to be there again. OKC, maybe they slide a little bit because they are going to play double big lineups more with Chet and Hartenstein, so that'll impact them. Miami, I would expect them to slide a little bit, mostly because Jimmy's a year older. You're probably going to have Hero more, which is going to impact your defense.
And Jimmy could always just take 30 games off too.
Correct. So that the Pelicans are 6th. Cleveland 7th. They will probably be in or around that range. Denver 8th. I think they will slide. They're clearly worse this year. And then the Knicks at 9th, which I think the Knicks could be a top 3 defense with what they have there, assuming everyone stays healthy. So the Sixers will be in shouting distance of 8 to 10, I think, at minimum, as long as they're reasonably healthy. I think given that they have Paul George, given that they got Caleb Martin, their starting / closing group has a higher ceiling. It's just about maintaining that floor. The Sixers finished 11th last season with not great personnel and with Joel Embiid basically playing half the season.
And so, Anthony Melton playing half the season.
So if you can get 60 games out of Joel, I feel confident that they can get into that top 8 range. And then the ceiling, I think, is potentially as high as anybody, because once you shrink that rotation down I know that guys like Kyle Lowry have matchup specific issues, but they have a lot of guys who are smart team defenders. And I think that matters a lot more the way the playoffs go now than there are teams that are hunt the bozo type teams where one-on-one defense is really what matters. But for the most part, what you see in the playoffs is just don't fall asleep, right? Like, don't play the James Harden off-ball defense where your head's in the clouds. I think they have a lot of guys who are engaged or proven they're engaged when it matters. So they should be a very good defense, hopefully.
Yeah. You both talked about the bench, mentioning Kyle Lowry. You talked about 1 through 7. Who do you like defensively in that second unit? If we're talking the 1 through 7 and we look at Andre Drummond for his rebounding purposes, helping out in that way, Kyle Lowry, again, having that pedigree. Is there anybody specifically that you like in that second unit that you said they're smart enough team defensively, but is there anybody that you trust as an individual?
Not really.
No. And that's why when Kyle brought up,
right.
Even their weak defenders are at least pretty engaged and pretty smart defensively. But when you get to the second unit, you do start getting into some weak one-on-one defenders.
But the one good thing is, like you guys have talked about with the rotations when we had that discussion, someone's always going to be on the floor. Of those 3 wings and Joel, and if Tyrese elevates his level of defensive play, someone's always going to be on the floor. So even when you do have those others, it should make up for it at least.
I mean, the ones you like defensively are Ricky and KJ. It's just, can they do enough offensively?
Now, Ricky is the big one for me because when he's had moments, he really pops. I worry that sometimes he's a little bit headless chicken out there where he flies too hard at a closeout or he loses his guy in transition. It's not like I think he's a bad defender forever. I think he is a very young, inexperienced player that's one of the main reasons why, if Daryl Morey or any of these other guys are like, young players are really not impactful until year 3. This is a big part of it, is you're just not used to having to be that engaged on defense every single play and playing guys who, frankly, are way better than most of the guys you've ever played in your life, where if you're not strong enough on a closeout, it's a made 3. If you're too strong on a closeout, that's a 1 dribble pull up or 2 dribbles. You're at the basket, layup, dunk, rotation, whatever it is. So Ricky's got to learn there. KJ, frankly, has some of the same problems. I think they both want to impact the game defensively, and I think KJ's shown he can as like a weak side rim protector type, which is different than what we've seen from Ricky. So to your point, it's somewhat about placing them in the right roles with the right guys around them.
We all silly like the mayor.